Welcome to everybody watching from afar and near. I'm your host, Saint-Gerard, your real estate agent, and I could not do these kind of webinars without my main man, Andrew Jaloza. Andrew, thank you for doing this, and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and the services that you practice.
Well, first of all, thank you, Evans, for having me back again. And I am an estate planning and elder law. What I do is I help people do planning for the young couples, middle-aged couples, or older single people, older people of same-sex relationships, and we help all different types of people to do planning, basically to get affairs in order, to make sure that you're protecting yourself against the things that might happen, having right documents in place to make sure that things work for you exactly the way you want, to give you peace of mind. That's what I really do. I sell peace of mind.
All right. Well, I'm glad that's a mouthful what you just said, but I want to make sure the audience knows who exactly this webinar is for. This is for families who've inherited a home, executors, beneficiaries, adult children, or helping their parents, anyone facing probate or real estate decisions that need to be made. That's who this is for. And the title of this webinar is Inheriting a House, What Families Need to Know. And we're going to dive into it. Andrew, before we get into the audience questions, can you walk us through what typically happens when someone passes away and real estate is involved?
What happens is people are very confused. They're not really sure what to do. It depends upon what the actual facts are. We have a family home. Who's the actual owner? Who is entitled to it? Whether they have a mortgage on it or a reverse mortgage. There's all different types of things that might happen. You don't normally, if there's no plans in place, then you have a situation where you don't have a written plan to do what you need to do next. And you need to find someone like us, an attorney usually, to figure it out. There are definitely steps that must be taken depending upon what we find. And depending upon what we find, it will then govern everything else that goes forward from there.
Can you dive in a little deep about what exactly is the situation when it comes to having a will and not having a will? I know what it is and you know what it is, but I'm sure the audience, they don't know.
Well, here's the thing. You make choices in life. The choice is to do a plan or don't do a plan. If you don't do a plan, don't worry. There's a plan there for you. Do you know what that plan is, Evans? It's the laws and the rules of the state of New York. Isn't that a wonderful plan? Isn't it one?
Yes. Yes.
Use the government default. It'll always work out well for you. Of course not, right? So that's the difference between having a will and not having a will. Not having a will, the government says what has to happen when someone dies. It says what you have to do, who has to do it, where you have to go to do it, when you have to do it, and then it tells you who gets your property. You don't have the options that are available while you're alive and well to do planning. Then you have a situation where the family doesn't know what to do next. They have to go figure out who is going to do something about that. And that's where the fighting starts. When people don't really know, they have nothing in place, don't have the decisions and the intelligence of the person who passed away to explain what they wanted to do. And if you have it written on a napkin, that's not good. That's not good enough. So if you take the time and create a will, you now can say what you want to happen upon your passing. You appoint a person. We'll talk about, I guess, that in a few moments, who's the executor. They'll then be able to gather all the property, including the real property, and make the decisions to deal with things. Without having someone named as the personal representative of the estate, that's either the executor if you have a will, or an administrator if you don't have a will. What that means is that until that time, nothing happens. Everything's frozen, bills still have to be paid, issues still have to be dealt with, and it's kind of chaos because you don't have any control or know who's actually going to be in control.
Well, you already brought it up. We might as well talk about the executor. How about we dive deep into that one?
Yeah.
Who exactly is the executor and how do you choose an executor?
Well, you choose an executor from the people in your life who you trust that they're going to follow your instructions. So the executor is the person appointed in a will to take care of the assets of the person who passed away, and then follow the rules that are set forth in the will. Do what the person who created it, the testator. When you die, you are testate. You have a will, or you die intestate, which means you don't. When you're intestate, the laws, like I said before, will govern what happens. When you die testate, the law says what has to happen in court because you have to go through probate no matter what. People come into my office and they have a will. They said, wow, we avoid probate. We have our will, right? And I said, I don't know what your lawyer explained to you when you did this will, but that's exactly opposite because a will must go through probate in order to first get activated by the judge issuing a letter called letters testamentary. And now the person who is appointed executor can go and do their job. Until that time, they can't even do anything. They can't gather the assets. They can't talk to the bank. They can't deal with the mortgage company. They cannot get the assets that belong to the testator until they get this letter of authority called letters testamentary. And now the court basically says who the executor is. So wills are great, and not having a will is not as great, but there is a process either way. And you wouldn't really know how to do it unless you have some experience. Most people come here, can I do this myself? I said, yes. You could also make a rocket, but if you don't know really how to make a rocket, how are you going to get that thing to fly?
It's safe to say always talk to the professionals and let the professionals do what they do best. And you just guide them along. Hey, this is what my goal is. How do I do this? Let the professionals handle it. My next question, you already discussed this regarding probate. What exactly is probate? We have the will, we have the trust. How do we avoid the probate?
Great. And as I just want to just say something about what you said about the professionals, it's the same thing for the real estate side, right?
Mhm.
Trust a professional. They see things every day. They have experience dealing with all the different things that happen. When you try to sell things yourself, I can tell you as the times that I represent people selling and buying because I do that as a estate attorney, as well as I've been a real estate attorney for a long time. The point is having a professional to be your realtor to help be on your side and fight for the issues that you need done. You don't even know what you don't know. So it's always good, like Evan said, to have a professional. But
Please say that one more time, the last part that you said. You don't know what you don't know.
yeah, well, you don't know what you don't know, and that's what we're here for. Because there's things that we don't know. We have to go get somebody else who has some experience in dealing with things often to get some answers because we don't know every single thing. But one thing's for sure that you hire a professional in the area, especially for buying or selling real estate. It's a good thing to have someone who's by your side. And this other reason for having it is because the transaction goes more smoothly with a trusted person on your side dealing with all the issues that you have to deal with. But we'll talk about probate as you asked me. So what is it's a legal process. It takes place in the surrogates court. Where do people go to fight in our world? They go to court, right? I mean, we don't usually go out into the octagon and get it on. That's it. At this point, what happens is when you feel like you've been mistreated or things aren't going your way, or you hated your older brother your entire life and your mom named this guy to be the executor. This is what happens when you go into court, because now all of those sibling rivalries and all of that resentment and all the things, the disgruntled feelings you have, comes out, and you have a soapbox because there's someone, the judge he has to listen to you. And everybody has to listen to you. So this is what happens when you go into probate quite often, especially when there's a house in the middle of the whole argument, that's where a lot of fighting happens. And sometimes that makes this process a very long process. It is a long process to start because it's not in your control. It's in the control of the courts of the city of New York, if that's where we're basically in the city of New York. So they're overworked, they're understaffed, and there's lots and lots of people in the city of New York, and there's only one surrogate in Queens, two in Brooklyn, one in the Bronx, and two in Manhattan, I think. And the point is though, so that's like 6 or 7 judges that hear all of the deaths and all of the things that are surrounding near death in the city of New York. There's millions of people, 8+ million people in the city of New York, and there are 6 surrogates. So it's ripe for delays. It's ripe for taking a long time for things to happen. But when you have to file with the court certain papers called a petition, on behalf of the executor, and you also have to get other people to sign papers. Because if you have three brothers and two sisters, and the parent dies, all five of you actually have the equal right to be the executor, and you all have to sign off on that, waive your rights to do that, and agree that the executor should move forward. How many times does someone not want to sign those papers? Because
Almost all the time. Almost
right?
all the time. There's always one sibling that's holding out. But before you go any further, I just want to ask you a question. Is there a difference between the boroughs, like as Queens and Brooklyn, between how things are done, or they're all generally the same?
I'll put it to you this way. What we have is called a unified court system throughout the state of New York. It is anything but unified. Every single county is different, and you wouldn't imagine that in the unified court system, the difference is also clerk by clerk. The people who read your papers are different on Tuesday than on Friday, and you get a different result. You bring in papers that were perfectly good for the person who collected them on Wednesday, and then you get letters, you get, emails from the clerk about how many things are missing or wrong, despite the fact that you just handed in that papers to someone else and they said they were fine. So we don't know. It's not a unified system. It's not unified county by county. I think that in the outer areas like Nassau, Suffolk, up in Westchester, things go much quicker. They're a little, I think, more organized or better staffed. In the city of New York, again, there's 2 million people in Queens, one surrogate. And that's what you got. Everything has to go. And the bottleneck is the surrogate. Everything kind of has to go through the surrogate because they're the judge and they have to sign off on everything. They have staffs of people, but it's still a process. So it takes somewhere between 2 weeks and 3 or 4 months to get letters, usually, if everybody cooperates. Because if everybody doesn't cooperate and the middle child doesn't want to sign the papers because they've been badly treated their entire life, it's not happening. Now you have to have a court hearing. We have to serve legal papers and summons them into court to ask them why they're not signing. This is what delays everything too. But even in a perfect scenario, it's several weeks to months before we get letters and before we can even move forward into the process. And depending upon what's there, it's going to depend upon what type of letters the court might issue. Because in Brooklyn, when there is a piece of property, for nearly every administration we go through, there is the requirement of a bond being filed, and that they're going to get limited letters. They're going to get letters saying you can't sell the house without a further order of the court. So that it makes it even more difficult, and it makes it more, the court oriented, and you can't just move on. You have to get the court's approval to even sell the property. So, and again, in Queens, sometimes as well, the restricted letters have to be lifted, and it's going to depend upon different things. It depends upon what the situation is and what other things are involved in the estate. If you have a lawsuit in the estate, or you have your victim's compensation fund thing like from 9/11, you have to have other kind of court orders to move forward. It's not just a simple process. You'd think it would be relatively simple and easy to have like two siblings, and everybody knows who's getting everything, and you're going to court, it's going to be no problem. That you're in there for 4 to 8 to 12 months before you get the ability to sell the house. And that's a problem because, if you have an empty house, it's even a bigger problem. Real estate that stays empty in the city of New York is often a dangerous thing. You may find
Yes.
unknown people in there.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to ask you about the timeline. You kind of talked about that. I was going to ask you specifically, basically, what kind of timeline can people expect from start to finish? Basically, hey, such and such has passed. We're putting the house up on the market, but we need to take care of this paperwork. I guess it depends on county to county, and if all family members are all on board.
That is a good way of summing it up. Yeah,
Okay.
everybody's on board. It may go quickly. You're looking at, well, first of all, there's also this thing about creditors, right? Because
Yes.
you have to give notice to creditors by publishing in a newspaper. That's taken care of as part of this process. And so when it publishes in the newspaper, once the letters are issued, you have to wait 7 months before distributing out all the property. Because if you have a creditor come up during, like during those 7 months, and you don't have any money left because you distribute everything out, you as the executor may be paying out of your pocket because you've done something you shouldn't have done. So technically speaking, once we start to finish, it's at least 7 months in most cases because you're concerned there may be a creditor. And if you're not and you take the risk, then it's still somewhere, I'd say that on average, somewhere between 7 months and 18 months is what you can say is a normal pattern for probate.
All right, that leads me to my next question because this happens a lot. What are the common mistakes that you see family make early in this process? I know you've seen everything.
Well, first of all, that you have the issues of, well, it's will or not will. Do you have a will or not? That's what part of the process. I'll tell you what families do that's very important. That's a good thing, is they use a trust rather than use a will. So I just will speak to that for one couple of minutes, right? So how do we avoid probate? Because most people want to avoid probate. People distribute or give their houses to their children while they're alive, and they'll reserve a life estate. So that means they have the right to stay there for the rest of their life, which also protects this tax advantage of passing your property on after you've passed away. So capital gains are taxes that gets paid on profit. And when you have real estate, like most of the real estate in the area we live has appreciated a lot over the last 10 to 15 years. So you're dealing with a situation where the government likes to get paid taxes when people have profit. And so the best answer to that is if you don't have exclusions against paying capital gains tax to yourself when you sell your property, it's better to pass it on to your family after you've passed away, because the appreciation will then pass tax-free. So that's one pitfall that people do, is they pass on their property completely to their child, losing the capital gains advantage, now put their house in someone else's name and all the things that might happen to them. I mean, I'm sure you've seen some of these things, like you put the child that we put the house's name in gets divorced, and the ex is now owning half of your house. Or they don't get divorced, but they pass away without leaving a will or anything, giving the house back to you, and now you're living in your daughter-in-law's house. Or you have the situation where the kids don't think you need this house anymore and basically throw you out of your own house because they're the owners of the house. Or the time you want to go paint or do something and take a loan to do it, but your children don't want you to take a loan to do it, and you don't get to do it. That's why we say it's not a good idea. Well, here's the better one. Your son's driving along, driving pretty quickly. Someone runs out in the street and he hits that person, who unfortunately passes away. Guess what? Your house is now subject to this lawsuit and the judgment that's going to be rendered in favor of the person who was killed by your child's car. Or your child doesn't pay their bills, they get a judgment against them, and now all of a sudden your bank account may get frozen, and there's a judgment lien against your house as well. So not necessarily a good idea to transfer it while you're alive, but it would be a good idea to put it into some kind of trust, which allows you to change how you own it. And by that ownership, you also avoid probate. It doesn't have to go through probate, doesn't have to go do any of this, no waiting for the court to give permission. You distribute out the property once unfortunately your family member has passed, but the passing on of the property takes place quickly, because it's all in the rules of the trust that really count. There's no court intervention. So that's what we suggest is for people to put their houses into trusts. So this way things can go much more smoothly. But if you still have to deal with the will, once the executor can sell the house, it's always good to seek out a realtor who knows what they're doing and to make sure that your house is going to sell for the best value possible. Because it is, if mom and dad lived in the house for 60 years and it hasn't been fixed up in 60 years, you need to have some realistic expectations about what you need to do. But, you're always going to get the best value and treatment by calling someone like Evans, because he has experience of selling all different houses in all different neighborhoods in all different conditions. And they'll tell you what you need to do with your house in order to make it saleable.
I think the number one thing is whoever whoever's involved, you have to have the conversation with all family members, make sure everybody's on board because you and I both have experienced this where we think everybody's on board. The main person tells us everybody's on board, but then everybody's not on board, and it always happens. So make sure everybody's on board. Listen to your professionals and just heed our advice. There's a reason why we've been doing this for so long. So many people who chose us to work with us, hired us to work with us. So heed our advice and always be open with the family members. Just make sure everybody's on board with everything. I have a couple of questions that keep popping up, and we're kind of into this one. What happens if a sibling doesn't agree on what to do with the property? Again, I'm going to say have the conversation. Everybody has to be on board.
Yeah, but part of that also comes down to it may come down to that there's going to be a lawsuit,
Yeah.
right? And when siblings don't agree and there's no other choice, what you have to do is go to court, and you have to ask the court to basically force a judicial sale, and then you may make as much money as you normally would, but quite often you don't because you're basically selling it under duress.
Yeah,
And
and at a discount also. I guess that's my next question would be, can one heir buy out another? We kind of answered that. So the answer is yes, but it's probably going to be at a discount, but you always have the conversation. What happens if a relative is already living in the home? So I guess the scenario is basically mom passes, Uncle Joe is living in the house, and you need to sell it. Yeah.
those kind of things. Yeah. I mean, it's a difficult situation. It's one of the more difficult situations we face in this area because when you're a family member, it's a lot harder to throw you out,
Yeah.
right? I mean, New York City is sometimes a difficult place to throw somebody out of a property anyway, but it's even more difficult when they're related to the family. And it's but the point is it's a timeline. It just makes
They're not going to give you top dollar if Uncle Joe's living there. I think the number one thing you need to do is have the conversation with Uncle Joe. Plan out basically if you are selling the house and if he is willing to leave, where are we putting him? You have to come up with a plan. It can't just be half. It has to be the full picture
right.
painted out for Uncle Joe.
And then you see Evans turn into the person who finds Uncle Joe, the next place he has to live. And because that's what they do. Realtors do all those things that is, other parts of this transaction can't or won't do. Or you make a deal with Uncle Joe and basically called cash for keys. You give us the keys and get out of the house on the right side of the door. We give you the cash to go find your new place.
And it's very common. It does happen quite often. Again, it's a conversation you need to have to be open to having the conversation. And obviously, there's two people that need to have the conversations, you and Uncle Joe or Aunt Susie or whoever. Have that conversation. I'm looking at the next questions that came up. What options do people have? What options do families have if they're unable to agree? That is a good question. You
Yeah.
mentioned courts. It always goes back to the
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the unfortunate part about our world, right? Everybody wants justice and everybody wants fairness. And what you really get is the courts. And unfortunately, we don't find much justice and fairness. What ends up happening most of the time is when people disagree, the best solution happens when everybody's unhappy, but you come to some kind of resolution somewhere in the middle. That's kind of hopefully where we always get. And that's where professionals like us get involved in the midst of the family to try to help negotiate, a reasonable settlement. Because there is a reasonable settlement to be had, almost always, but sometimes it takes a little while to get there.
All right, we got a couple more topics. I'm just looking through my notes here. All right,
Okay.
so as you're inheriting the property, you have several options to think about. Are you going to keep the property? Are you going to sell the property? Or are you going to rent it? Obviously, you have to have the conversation with the full family, find out financially what makes sense to you. If you keep the property, there's the maintenance, there's the upkeep, there's the bills you got to pay. If you sell the property, you have different things that you have to factor in. You also have to maintain the property, make sure that you don't have any issues inside the property to make sure you're getting top dollar. If you rent the property, you can do that, but we're here in New York and you know how difficult that could be. Basically, if you decide to rent it and now later on you decide you want to sell it, it might be difficult to sell that property with the tenants in it and they don't want to leave. So that's also something you have to consider. Next thing is determining property value. That's where someone like me comes along. You have a conversation with a respectable, I almost said attorney. Well, you're going to need an attorney soon down the line, but you're going to need a realtor
Only
basically to,
only respectable ones, though.
yes, only respectable ones. And you're going to get a respectable agent, realtor, to walk you through what the value of the property is. If there's any things that you need to fix in the property, if you're selling it as is, those are all questions that you got to talk to your agent with. And everybody who's involved, basically, you all have to have the conversation. Preparing the inherited house for sale. We're always going to have a plan for you how to sell the property. It really depends on how much money that you want to spend to keep it, market value. You get the market value. How much money are you willing to spend? Yeah, obviously you have to upkeep the outside, the inside, and everything above. You want to make sure everything's working and stuff like that. So we have to have that conversation and keep the house clean. That's as clean as possible. If you don't have people to clear out the junk removal and stuff like that, you talk to an agent who has access to people that do all this sort of thing. And that's one of the things that I pride myself in. I work with a lot of professionals like Andrew, and pretty much we run the gamut of different people that we're going to need for services for our clientele. And managing a vacant property is very important. As Andrew alluded, here in New York, we do have a problem where people know that the house is vacant, they take advantage, and they move themselves in illegally. So we want to make sure that the house is not sitting for too long. Obviously, me as a realtor, I'm going to check on it. I'm going to make sure I let the neighbors know that basically, hey, look, keep an eye on the property, basically, and stuff like that. If I'm nearby or my team members are nearby, we always keep an eye on the property. And obviously, I would always suggest to clientele, if you can buy a camera system, put it on the property just to keep an eye on it, and we all have access to look and keep an eye.
Or like selling the house and that kind of stuff. It also starts by you making a plan as the person who owns the house and a concern that maybe in the future your family needs to sell it or do whatever. It's always a lot better when your rules are in writing, what you
Yes,
want to happen, right? Especially when you know your children, you know who's living in the house, and you know what the fight is going to be.
you know who's responsible and who's not responsible.
Exactly. So giving a reasonable amount of time for them to, get out or buy out their other siblings or do those kind of things, how you determine what market value will be for that transaction, who has to pay what during the time. If you put it all in writing, it usually works out a lot better because at least your kids have, or your heirs, whoever is getting it, has an instruction to follow, right? If it's clear that it has to be sold because, and it's sell as quickly as possible because they want the money to be distributed amongst the beneficiaries, then that's usually what happens because mom or dad wanted it that way, right? And it will be enforced more easily by going through probate and getting the court involved.
And just think of it as this your last wish. There's not going to be any too much infighting if it's your law, your ruling. This is what mom and dad wanted. This is what this is what has to happen. So handles all the heirs. This is what their last wishes were, basically, to handle it this specific way. Another thing that we didn't discuss is pretty much anybody out of state families, what the considerations basically they might have. So it's again conversation that you have to have with the full family, and obviously mom, dad, whoever the property belongs to, it has to make sense, and they have to include everybody. All right, I'm getting a couple more questions here. Do inherited properties need renovations before being sold? That really depends on how much money is involved, how much money is in the pool basically to do any renovations or anything like that. If there is money basically to do, I always keep it, I don't like to spend people's money. It really depends on how much money are you actually going to get for the sale of a home. You can't really think I'm going to spend 10 grand here and that's going to net me 100. So obviously I'm using those numbers, but more numbers, more higher numbers than that, basically. That's usually where people's mindset is. If I spend X amount, I'm going to get triple my return. It's not always the case. Plus, whoever's purchasing the house, they're going to have a completely different vision than you do. So keep that in mind. So we try to make the house look as presentable as possible. And then obviously we price it right. We, meaning you and I, we discuss this. You ultimately make the decision of where we're going to price the home. The next question is, how soon should families begin to explore their options? Andrew, I'll let you answer that question.
I think that really depends upon the circumstances, right? When you're dealing with a house and you're dealing with someone's death, I mean, it depends. The questions are, is someone living there, right? I mean, who and who that is. And And you said, renting, if you're going to rent it out, who's going to take care of it? Who's going to manage it? Who's going to make sure they collect the rent? If you have, family members living in the house, are they going to pay full rent? Are they going to pay market rent? Do they have to take care of utilities and other issues? Who's going to take out the garbage if it's a multiple family house? Then if you're going to have someone living there, are they going to take care of all the upkeep and whatever has to happen? And what happens and how long is that going to go on for? And, these are the decisions that come that people, heirs together, have to make. And so this way it works out as good as it possibly can for everybody.
I'm glad you brought all that up because a lot of people don't think about things like that, and this is why you're the professional that you are. That you bring these things up. I'm like, all right, these are things people definitely need to think about as early as possible. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no, I was just going to tell a quick story about the
Go
family.
ahead.
That the mother is, a hardworking Latina woman who is just, she worked hard her whole life and kept this 3-family house for the family. And it's her insistence that the family never be sold, and be kept as like a family refuge. There's 1 or 2 of the kids living there. There's barely any rent being collected, from them. And she made all 7 of them her representatives. 7 people having to make a decision about everything. Against my better advice, that's what they did. And I have to tell you, it's become a nightmare because there's no way you're going to get 7 people to have to agree to anything.
That is interesting, but obviously, mom and dad, whatever their wishes are, we have to respect it, and that's what we do. Hopefully, everybody gets along and everybody does what's right for the family. Fingers crossed.
Right.
All right, so we've already talked about challenges from heirs in another state. We kind of talked about that already, but I'm looking at some other questions that are coming in. Wow, we got a lot. All right, I'm going to rapid fire these ones. Can you explain the probate in simple terms on how it affects real estate? This is from Michael in Bayside.
Yeah. So probate affects real property because there's no way to push real property from one person to another after someone dies without having the court be involved or some way to determine that everybody who may have an interest has been satisfied. This is an issue of title, right? We have to have clear title when we transfer property. The fact that there may be heirs is something that's very important to a title insurer, right? Because without title insurance, it's very difficult to, you're not buying a house without title insurance, and you're certainly not doing it if you're taking a mortgage because the lender is not going to let you do that. So the process of probate with respect to real estate is a lot about making sure that clear title can pass so that the property can be sold. And that's what probate determines. Probate determines who are the people who are entitled. If it's administration, it would be who are the distributees of the person who died. Those are the blood relatives, and it's like the family tree. You could have the best cousin in the world. Your cousin's not getting anything in administration because he's not close enough on the family tree to get anything, or certainly no friends get anything. And certainly no other people who, like, if you have common law-ish marriage, because there is no common law marriage in New York, you think that when a husband dies, the wife gets everything, right? It doesn't work that way, especially if you're not actually married. If you're not married, what happens is when the husband dies, everything goes to their children because the wife was not a wife. She was a common law wife, which we don't recognize in New York. I mean, there are those kind of situations that happen. So, but the probate process is meant to determine who is really entitled, get the court's stamp of approval on it so that we can pass on that real property with confidence that anybody who had a claim had a chance to be involved and make their claim to it. And so that when the buyer buys the property, they're getting clear title, not a headache. So that's when you're dealing with real estate, I think that's the primary reason you have to go through probate. Unless you create a trust and then you have the rules of the trust control and then the title company makes sure that the trust was validly signed and whatever, and it was all good, and that all of the people involved in the trust are the people who get what they're supposed to get according to the rules of the trust that were created. It's a whole different process and a lot easier to navigate.
All right. Next question comes from Patricia in Valley Stream. How much authority does an executor have over the property?
Well, the executor has authority over the property to take ownership on behalf of the estate and represent and protect the beneficiaries of the estate. There's a fiduciary duty that they have to the estate and the people who are involved in it to do the right thing. The authority to sell the property depends. They cannot unilaterally do anything and anything, everything and anything they want, and the other people have the right to challenge it, and then the court and the judge gets involved to help settle those kind of things. But they don't have unfettered authority to just do whatever they want, especially when it comes to selling a house. And often what has to happen, the executor has to go to the court, the surrogate, and get an order allowing them to sell. So I think that answers that question.
I think it does also. Next question is from Donna in Oceanside. What are some ways that families can avoid conflicts during this process? I have my answer. I want to hear your answer.
One, use a trust. That's number one. Number two, be open and honest. Communicate. But I have to say, I was on a Zoom call today with families involved in a family involved in a probate today. The older brother is the executor. The younger or middle child, I'm not sure where he fits, was just complaining how the older one is just being belligerent and not talking nicely and etc. And we spent 45 minutes talking about that and 15 minutes to talk about how we're moving forward. So it is a family dynamic. When family is involved, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that have happened in all the years before you get to this whole situation. The best way to deal with probate is not be involved in it. Figure out a way to avoid that so that your family doesn't have to deal with that after you die. Creating a trust, whether it's revocable or irrevocable, is an important thing because it changes the whole dynamic about what happens and how it happens and how quickly it happens and how less frustrating everything is.
All right. My answers are very simple. You kind of hit it on the head. Number one is basically family has to have a conversation altogether. I know there's a lot of emotion. I know there's a lot of baggage that comes with this, but you have to have an open conversation. Just think of it. This is a business right now. This is a business. Put your business hat on. And the second thing is basically go find a professional that you trust that has the whole family's interest and have that conversation with them, and they'll guide you through the process and listen to your professionals. All right, Andrew, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to do this webinar with us today. If somebody only remembers one thing from tonight's webinar, what do you want them to remember?
What I want them to remember is that real estate is a very important and unique thing in a family. It's usually the generational wealth of the family. And dealing with that really makes sense to get the best professionals possible because it's, emotions, thoughts, jealousy, or all those things exist. But overall, like Evan said, this is a business decision. Everybody wants to settle this estate and move on. And getting a professional to help you deal with it is the best decision that you can make, both from the real estate side to the legal side and every other side, right? Whether it's financing, money, all those parts that are involved with when you're dealing with real estate, it really makes sense to work with good, honest professionals who can guide you and help sometimes protect you from yourself because we are often the referees. We're or the bartenders. Everybody's got a story. They want to tell it. And you need to be able to do that and to help move people towards the end that they really is in their best interest. Sometimes you have to help people move through their best interest. So it's really important to hire people with professional experience doing what they need to do.
Andrew, thank you so much. I couldn't have said it better than what you just said. I just want to look at the audience and talk to them for a second. Every family situation is completely different, unique. It's important to understand your options early, assemble the right team, like Andrew said, and I said, to help you guide you through this process. Reach out to myself, reach out to Andrew if you have any questions. You want to schedule a consultation? We can do it via Zoom. We can meet face to face. You can come to our respective offices. If you want to have both of us over, basically, we can do that as well. Subscribe to our channel for any of the future webinars that we have coming up. We have different topics regarding real estate. And Andrew is kind enough to be in quite a few of our webinars, seminars, and podcasts. So feel free to take a look. If you have questions, give us more questions because we need more topics also. And the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is connect with us. Andrew, how can they reach you if they have any questions, they want to schedule an appointment, or they just want to pick your brain? How can they reach you?
Our website is aljlaw.com. Info@aljlaw.com will get you into, if you have any questions, we'll get you an answer within 24 to 48 hours. Just hit the button, Ask Andy. We have a feature that, we really love people sending in questions to, and we keep an eye on that, and we answer all the time. Our telephone number is 718-514-2066, and we're located here in Queens. We travel. I go wherever I have to go, and love what I do, love helping families, would love to help you.
Awesome. Andrew, thank you so much. As you hear in the background, Andrew's getting phone calls from people who are watching this right now because we were live. So he's getting people reaching out to him based on the information that he gave us. My information, you have any situation, you inherit a property, you need to sell it, let's have a conversation. Let's talk it through. My contact info is 917-975-5985. As a realtor, my phone is always with me. Call me, text me. Let's have a conversation. I work here in Queens, Brooklyn, Long Island, the Bronx as well. If you have any questions, scenarios, do not be ashamed or embarrassed. Let's have the conversation. Let's talk it out. If I don't have the answers, I'm pretty sure Andrew has the answers, and I'm going to pick his brain also. So you can reach me again, 917-975-5985. You can also reach me on my office line, which is 718-475-2760. Our website is also mynyhomesales.com. You can find us all over social media. I'm usually going by Evans Sells Homes, so you'll probably see this on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it, I'm probably on there. And again, do not hesitate. Reach out to us. You got questions, we have answers for you. Thank you again for watching. You have a great day. All the best to you. Talk to you soon.
Our website and on social media, you'll find us at the Estate Planning and Elder Law Group, and you'll find us on TikTok, on YouTube, Zoom. Come to our website. It has lots and lots of information about all the things that you may be concerned with. And again, my telephone number is 718-514-2066. Thank you. Thank you, Evans, for another opportunity.
No, thank you for helping me put this together. And thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.